Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Court-Martial Podcatht. Introducing your host for this evening first. He is the host with the most from the West Coast, the Bay Area brawler, Skylar Greenberg. And his partner, he has colonized, energized, and revolutionized the podcasting wrestling world today. Your colonial champion, Sean McCarty. And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, one more time to another edition of the Court-Martial Podcatht, where we talk about all things news, all things professional wrestling, all things made for smarks, by smarks, for the entertainment of smarks, and a population outside of that small niche audience. In all of YouTube, I am your colonial champion, Sean McCarty, here today, really just along for the ride, but because Skylar can't drive and hold the microphone at the same time, I end up doing the introductions, but this whole show is being steered by a man who's got a CDL as far as professional wrestling podcast hosting is concerned. He is the man of the hour, the man with the power. He is too sweet to be sour. He is the Bay Area brawler himself, Skylar Greenberg. Make sure you're taking the safe way while you're driving.
Well, it's all about the game and how you play it.
That's right.
It's all about the control, and if you can take it.
It's all about fish bowls, and if you can take it. As Skylar is we are broadcasting live because we are doing some recruitment for guests on the episode in the Monterey Bay Aquarium. And
oh, shut the hell up.
No, Skylar is off running very important errands for the Court-Martial Podcatht, so if you can't hear him, I implore you to just turn those hearing aids up and you will do just fine. Skylar, how are you feeling today, my man?
Today's been an interesting day. It's been an interesting week and a half, basically.
Sure, yeah, it sure has.
It's been a fascinating time in professional wrestling, and we need to recap everything that has happened with our news of the week.
Coming straight to you from the Golden Gate Garage, this is the WrestleNews with Skylar Greenberg.
That is right. It is the news of the week, folks, with the Bay Area brawler, Skylar Greenberg, at your service. And basically today we're going to talk about two different wrestling companies. Kind of a look at the two titans of wrestling.
All right. Let's do it.
Now, of course, a lot has been made about WWE coming under control of one Triple H, or Hunter.
Yeah.
And what do you think so far, from the little that you have heard and the little that you have seen so far of Triple H's leadership of WWE?
Well, I mean, it's, as we've said multiple times, it's going to be a process, but I'm finding Triple H to be a lot more personable with the talent. You know, it seems a lot more like, you know, we were kind of discussing it at the SummerSlam review last week, is that Triple H has spent this past 8 or 9 years just learning and listening, really listening to the fans, and I think, and what they want, and also what the talent wants. I think that Triple H is trying to do his best to kind of mend fences that that Vince McMahon has previously burned.
Very much so, and you can see it in the fact that he's brought back NXT talent that were previously released by Vince McMahon.
Like Karrion Kross
came out and attacked Drew McIntyre, and he had Scarlett with him.
Yeah. You know, that was a surprise. I mean, Dakota Kai wasn't under contract when she came back, but then she ended up being part of Bayley's squad. So, you know, you almost wonder if Triple H, you know, way back in the day, might have known that this whole whirlwind was coming and said, look, listen, don't sign with anywhere major. Just give me a little bit of time. I'm going to be taking over shortly. Just bear with me here, and I promise I'm going to bring you guys back when I'm in control of Sting.
I mean, for example, Dexter Lumis is another one. Brought back on Monday Night Raw.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of guys that I think that Triple H likes and always liked, and that obviously Vince just didn't see anything in because he couldn't at that point. And it almost became like a vendetta for Vince that anyone that we're calling up from the main roster, we have to kill.
Right. Because nothing can be as successful as
That's
what
right.
I create, goddammit.
But now Triple H is starting to mend those fences and be like, okay, look, these are guys that I saw true talent in and I think are capable of said talent, so let's give them the opportunity to showcase properly that talent.
That's true. But the real question I think you have to ask is, what's next for Triple H? What is he going to do with this talent now?
Well, it's going to be hard to say. You know, I haven't watched any of the episodes of television since he's taken over, but by all accounts, I've heard that they have improved in quality and at least continuity's sake.
I mean, it says something when Josh again watched a full Monday Night Raw without having to gag.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable that it was something that was even halfway palatable. Not to say that I'm going to become a regular or anything like that, but it seems like by all accounts, I have not heard many complaints in the WWE camp. It's more drawn the eyes of people who may have left that might now think that leaving might not have been the best idea.
Right, and again, this could be a situation where now Triple H can do his vision that he had in NXT on the main roster. I mean, Bobby Lashley versus Tommaso Ciampa for the United States Championship. Tell me you are not interested.
I'm excited. Ciampa got the opportunity. I don't love the fact that they did 2 triple threat matches to get to AJ Styles and Ciampa. I feel like you had enough of AJ Styles and Ciampa at SummerSlam to just work the program, but still, it's exciting to see Ciampa, who was with The Miz. Let's just clear that, folks. And after Miz surprised me at SummerSlam, this isn't entirely a knock, but for Ciampa, it is a significant downgrade being paired with The Miz.
Yeah, but again, I think they're going to overcome it, especially if it leads like The Miz attacking Ciampa out of jealousy and Johnny Gargano comes back. I'm calling that right now.
Well, nothing's on the table right now. That's the craziest part. It's like, prior to Triple H taking over, Sky, I think you can agree that there was we could at least understand the idea of where the booking was going, how people were going to be presented, and what they were going to have to overcome in adversity on the main roster regarding stupid character additions or who wins and who loses. It was all very down the line, cut and straight in the middle. I don't think we have that luxury of having the probably correct guess anymore. So it's hard to say what's going to happen with anybody at this point.
Yep. And I'm really interested because Clash of Castle is the next show. And there's some interesting matches that are there. We still are a couple of days late.
Yeah. Clash at the Champions, or Clash at the Champions. I'm clashing at my champions, not with the champions or of the champions. Clash at the Castle, I can't speak. Clash at the Castle should be quite an interesting event. Do you think they pulled the trigger on the title change there? I seem to think not.
Supposedly, I think there's going to be a use of Kross in order to get the title off of Roman. I don't know how they're going to do it, but we have to watch and see, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be something interesting because now it's at a point where it really will mean something when whoever takes it, takes it. I wouldn't be surprised if they wait for Cody, but who knows what kind of pressures the network is going to try to put under to expedite the process.
Right, and speaking of that, we're going to go to the other side.
SmackDown or AEW?
AEW.
Oh boy, the meltdown has begun, folks.
Yep. So apparently there is pressure on AEW because Time Warner is constantly changing. There have been budget cuts that have resulted in shows other than AEW getting canceled. Like that girl movie that was done and in post-production got canceled.
Yeah, that was pretty wild. That it was.
I know, it is.
Yeah, that it was just like, you know what? We're just nixing this after Lord knows how many millions of dollars went into that movie.
Yep. But the whole thing and the reason why this is concerning the AEW is that their TV deal is coming up at the end of the year. And they want to renegotiate for a higher deal, and I don't know if they're going to get it. Now, I'm going to allow you to have a couple of minutes to just rant about AEW booking and whether or not they may get more money from the network for that.
Okay, look. Oh, God, where do I start with this? We could talk all day about this. I'm going to try not to. Recently, Tony Khan booked a match where Danny Garcia tapped out Bryan Danielson. And look, when I want to make a point here with Tony Khan, because the thing that frustrates me so much about this is that Danny Garcia looks like every single other small guy that they've got on that roster. He looks like the Wheeler Yutas, and I hate to say this because I know he's decent as a heel, but the Sammy Guevaras and even the Scorpio Skies, and there's a number of people who look almost exactly the same and do the exact same moveset with the exact same level of just doing moves and not really having any sort of charisma about them. And it's got to the point where I know that Bryan Danielson probably wants to help the younger guys, but Tony Khan does not have a goddamn clue who the talent he should be pushing is. You know, if you want Bryan Danielson to tap for somebody who is actually marketable as a star. And clearly, Tony Khan does not seem to know that, and I don't think he's going to get any better at it. You know, because we gave the benefit of the doubt. We said, look, Tony Khan, he's inexperienced because he's never done this before. For the first 2 years, all the trash and all the garbage we just were accommodating with because it's like, okay, look, it's amateur, it's mark booking. You know, he clearly doesn't have anything around him. And I always ask Sky, and you remember this, how many times did I ask, where are the agents? Where are all these people that hired he hired to give experience and credibility to this show? Why aren't they all saying something to him? And Tony doesn't have the balls to say no to people's ideas like Jericho, who I think, you know, you say things about the Orange Cassidys and you say things about the Danhausens, but you want to talk about the people who've done the most damage to AEW, you got to put Chris Jericho on that list. Because Chris Jericho... No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sky.
Sorry. No, continue.
Well,
on a roll.
Well, the reason I say the reason I say Jericho is that he's somebody who does know how to do it, has known how to do it, has drawn money before, and instead of him bringing everyone to his level, he sank down to their level. And to have Bryan Danielson put on what, and by all accounts, would be a good match with Danny Garcia, but the point is it's Danny Garcia. You know, if you want to boost the future, that's fine, but you got to know what kind of future is marketable and what's not. And when you look at the ratings since Punk and MJF have left, there is nobody on... Well, no, I shouldn't say that. There's a lot of people on that roster who could draw you money, but the people who are getting featured are the people who will not draw you money. They're the people who are just either friends of Tony or guys who are nondescript, white meat, not even baby faces necessarily, but just white meat, let's do moves style, the video game style that Tony Khan has come to love and enjoy. And the problem is, with this network deal coming up, with the merger with Discovery, which we mentioned, with the Discovery merger that we mentioned, and then that like same week they did the Crown of Thorns spot with Adam Page and Adam Cole. How many people remember that match? Do you, Sky?
What match?
Exactly.
There's been a million of them.
Yeah.
There's been a million of these gimmick matches that just overuse weapons or overuse blood or overuse stipulations that have made it so that I can't remember, I can't keep track, I can't care. And I don't care.
Yeah.
And people are starting to care less and less because you've overused the gimmicks to the point where now there's expecting to be at least 2 or 3 every single match. Every week is going to have somebody bleeding. Every week somebody's going to do something so stupid and horrendous you can't believe it until you watch next week when they go out and top themselves.
Yeah, and people are getting hurt left and right. So obviously there's no real care or regard for the talent involved. And that's shown by having the 4 or 5 different shows you're booking. You bought Ring of Honor saying you were going to book all of it, and you have them show up occasionally and have an occasional pay-per-view, but it's not like that's actually a running business. That's something that you're sometimes sticking an IV into for about 5 or 10 minutes, like a car battery, to have run for a couple seconds and then dissipate. No disrespect, Claudio, but that's what he's using Ring of Honor for. But here's the thing that bothers me.
Honestly, but here's the thing, though. That's what AEW should have been. It should have been just a territorial pay-per-view you do monthly in a regional area so you can do the gimmicks and be like, you know what? They did a stupid gimmick, but there was only once a month, so I have time to digest it and move on to the next stupid gimmick show that they have.
Well, and now with these networks where... You know, you got to give credit to WWE and Vince here because despite the fact being absolutely lifeless. It was lifeless because they knew that they didn't want to rock the boat with their networks. Because if they rock the boat with their networks, that could lead to a boat. TV is a crucial part of WWE's programming. And Tony Khan would not survive on YouTube, just on YouTube alone. But that's not why I'm mad. That's not why I'm mad at Tony Khan. I'm mad at Tony Khan because he has all of this talent. He has all the talent in the world that he could have possibly signed. He's got people who have ideas and have care and have structure and know how to do it and want to be able to help get guys marketable. But instead of building an environment where he fosters that talent and you really feel like he's a ringleader, whether he knows what he's doing or not, he's throwing their contracts in their face. Well, I have 5-year contracts, so if they want to try and get out of WWE, they're going to have to try. Rubbing their nose basically up his ass instead of saying, well, this is the place that we're supposed to be, and this is where we're going to have to be. And then this meltdown that he's been having lately as far as the whispers backstage that it's an incredibly unprofessional environment in AEW and that Tony Khan has become much more controlling and much more, shouting match with people, whether it's ideas that they like or ideas that he like, or it's just become a miserable place to work. There's no structure that's evidenced by the way the shows are booked and thrown together and the kind of finishes that are come up with. And then Tony's big denial of it. Oh, everything's fine. It's all in paradise. This AEW is better than it's ever been. You listen to a media scrum, it makes you sick to your stomach. Because he's just working you. Because he's working himself. Because he's a freaking mark. And at this point, it's just getting to where it's not an if, it's a when. One of two things either happens. Either Tony completely loses his mind and he ends up leaving his own company scorched earth style, or the network realizes, whether it's the crown of thorns and all the offensive stuff that's been on the TV, or it's just the fact that the ratings have gone nowhere since Punk left and since they started, basically. There's only two people that really positively impact ratings. Punk and MJF. You alienated MJF out because you refused to pay him top guy money, which he deserved. CM Punk gets injured, and the next 3 to 4 months that you have spent doing nothing but just sitting on your ass, have one of the worst pay-per-views ever made in Forbidden Door, and just folly-foot around. How is the network supposed to look at that and go, well, they're not really drawing any more fans, they're not really making us a ton of money, they've got 5 shows, what are we doing here? And with the contract coming up this year, you got to imagine that they're looking at WWE going, well, this guy took over and in 2 weeks it made that whole company look and feel different. So, it seems like, they're really starting to bring some people back in just on that alone. So what's Tony's problem? And I think it's just, I'm sorry, Sky, and then I'm going to let you go because I've been talking for a while now. My biggest problem is that Tony Khan's head is so far up his own ass that he cannot come to terms with the fact that he no longer has the handicap that he once did, and if he is not careful, all of this stuff he's set up is not nearly as ironclad as he thinks it is.
And this is the thing that's going on, basically, is that look at the situation that's happened. Look at what's evolved. Look at what's changed. The wrestling scene is different. Tony Khan got the biggest possible gift basket in the world. We got a wrestling industry that was sinking under the abrasive leadership of Vincent Kennedy. And not only that, but look at the situation that's happening right now. Look at what's going on with everything that Tony Khan has done since AEW was formed. He literally got a fruit basket in CM Punk and Bryan Danielson and MJF, and he's wasted all 3 of them.
Yeah, Tony has gotten so many gifts that he is just completely and utterly squandered because he doesn't know how to use the toys. He's got the cars, but he doesn't know how to make them drive.
And the thing about it is that look at what Warner Media is doing right now. They're cutting costs. They're cutting budgets. They're trying to save money because of the merger that's happened with Discovery. They're trying to figure out what they're going to look like in the next few years. are they going to want AEW, who has a ballooning roster, and while they may not pay you directly for it, they're going to be like, why do you guys think that you deserve a higher TV deal when your ratings are going lower and lower? Well, I need to cover the cost of my roster. Well, your roster is not getting better ratings, so you better do something about it because we're not going to pay you the money that you want.
Yeah. We're going to have to do a "you've been released by AEW" intro, because I guarantee you there's going to be a sickle taken out at some point, whether Tony Khan wants to admit it or not, but he's going to have to cut at least half of this roster.
And not only that, not only is he going to have to cut half of that roster, he's going to have to cut his management, his executive positions. He's going to have to get rid of whatever Ring of Honor is, or just like maybe use it as a thing that's making money on the side, like a merchandising thing. But you can't use that as a promotion too.
No. No. Because no one's going to give him the deal for a third TV show. I mean, and look at how much he cares about Rampage. When was the last time that Rampage had anything that drew attention? When Punk was on it.
Right, and that's the sad part, is that they were gifted this gift. CM Punk, literally the biggest name in wrestling that was not in WWE and was never going to appear in wrestling again, and you had him. And you almost used him correctly. You got him the title. I know the injury is not their fault because CM Punk got a little too enthusiastic and jumped into the crowd and then accidentally hit his foot on the barricade.
Yeah, no, that's not AEW's fault. But you look at the way that AEW has tried or has failed to build the show around Punk. And I think that's the true disservice they do to CM Punk, because everything that CM Punk has done, he has knocked out of the park. You know, no matter what he's been involved in, he has knocked it out of the park. But it's not like there was much competition for best segment of the night anywhere else on the show, except for MJF. And look what they did to MJF. And really what they did to MJF is really doing a disservice to Punk too, because they're the only two who were positively affecting ratings. And you lost one to injury and the other one due to incompetence. And I just, at this point, whatever happens to AEW, Tony's going to deserve it. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not necessarily mad at Tony Khan. I'm not necessarily frustrated at Tony Khan. But at this point, whatever's coming to him, he's going to deserve.
And the hardest part about it is that looking at where wrestling is now, Tony Khan was gifted WWE not being competent. Now Triple H is competent, and Triple H is coming in. He's making these shows, at least if they're not palatable, at least watchable. He's doing something with their roster. AEW, on the other hand, is going, everything's great. Nothing's going wrong. I have the best people. You know, I have the best people. I hired the best people. And you have to thank me, Tony Khan, for hiring the best people and paying for the best people. Because really, when you look at my people, they're the best people in the world at what they do. And these best people are...
You like Danny Garcia? Here's some Danny Garcia. Oh, do you like that? Well, no? Well, here's some more Danny Garcia. I'm going to keep giving you Danny Garcia till you like it. You like Bryan Danielson? Watch him lose to Danny Garcia. And...
No. You want to make it even better? Hey, guys, I got Orange Cassidy. You want some freshly squeezed orange juice? I got some freshly squeezed orange juice. Here's Orange Cassidy again.
I like dressing up as him for Halloween. So that's why he's still there.
But the whole thing is that why, of all people, would you put the title on Jon Moxley and expect him to be the one to carry you to the point where when CM Punk comes back and that title versus title match happens, it's interesting.
Do you think that they should have just kept the title on Punk and had him show up a couple weeks during that without doing the interim title business? Or do you think the interim title business is better for it?
Should have put the title on Bryan Danielson.
Yeah, but no, we can't do rational things. No, we have to cater to the lowest common denominator of smark.
I mean, come on. Interim World Heavyweight Champion Bryan Danielson versus World Heavyweight Champion CM Punk.
I mean, it'd be great, but I don't know whether that... I would wait on that for a better, proper build, though. You know, I don't know. It depends. And also, remember that Danielson was injured at the same time, so it's during that garbage 10-man match. So it's not like he necessarily would have full-blown been available.
Shit.
Yeah. So
there goes my fantasy booking.
I know. Well, so it's difficult because it's like when you look at who could be an interim champion, there weren't many people who could put it on. Jericho, maybe, but that, his ratings, he has a noticeable ratings drop. Hundreds of thousands of fans stop watching when Chris Jericho shows up. They have proven this. And
well, that's because Chris Jericho is so fat, he sits in front of the TV. No one can watch it.
Well, no one can watch it because no one can bother caring about anything he does because he's now the sports entertainment guy and a wizard, and it's just nothing about Chris Jericho is anywhere redeemable at this point because he decided to play with the kids instead of teaching the kids how to be grown-ass adults.
Right, and that's a shame. But anyways, the whole point about the news of the week and just talking about the WWE versus AEW thing, how do you see this ending? Or is there an ending right now?
Well, it depends on how quickly Tony Khan melts down. I don't know the meltdown ratio. This is not a scientific experiment we have been able to get some standardized testing for. So, my hypothesis, however, is that Tony Khan has at least got another year on him. But that year could be a very, very bumpy ride, especially if MJF ends up going to WWE right as they turn TV 14. And they get Cody back. And they get this positive working environment that all these people... I mean, did you hear what Miro said?
I saw it. Miro, he's not happy about his position in AEW, and he wants out of his contract.
Yeah, Miro said that he was better in WWE, which he wasn't really, but he was the exact same.
No. Like, there were moments when Rusev or Miro was looking good in WWE, at least in a mid-card champion. At least he had opportunities to show his personality and have fun or dominate. He had a longer run with... What has Miro done on AEW? What has he done?
He had a good match with Eddie Kingston and a good match with Bryan Danielson. That's about as much as I remember.
Yeah, Eddie Kingston should have been the one to have the interim title now that I think about it.
Yeah, although... see, now that's weird because do you want a guy, and I love Eddie Kingston, I love Eddie Kingston, but do you want a guy who looks like that to be your world's champion? Like, as this is what I represent as the best of the best?
Punk would have been damn interesting.
It would have been very interesting. Would have been incredibly interesting. But I don't know. To me, Eddie Kingston feels like one of those like attractions, that you come to see fight, but you never really want to see the title on him. Kind of like Junkyard Dog, or who's another one who's like that, very charismatic but never really had it.
I mean, that's the thing. Guys like Junkyard Dog, Kamala, guys Andre, like, you don't need a title. Undertaker's another one, although Undertaker got the belt a lot.
Yeah. Exception to the rule there. He got the belt, what, 8 times, 7 times?
Like 7 or 8 times. But again, guys like Andre, Junkyard Dog, Carmella.
Oh, man. Oh,
Josh
God. That's
take Kamala's
funny.
body, put Carmella's head on
Carmella.
and call it Carmella and have it wrestle for TAW Gaming.
It's Money Mala. Oh, man. That's funny. I would love to see Kamala in a singlet just moonwalking on the stage. Carmella. Oh, it's the code of Uganda.
Make it happen.
Oh, jeez.
Make it happen.
Carmella and Apollo Crews. Tag team. Make it happen.
Gross.
Anyway.
Gross. But anyways, let's shift this. We mentioned a little bit of it, but there's this whole thing right now about television networks and how important they are to wrestling. And I think that really leads into our conversation about wrestling's relationship with TV in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because ever since the advent of TV, wrestling and basically everything else, sports, news, entertainment, have all been associated with it. And it's been very important and very key to forge that relationship with those networks.
Well, and it's interesting, too, because you don't really see major television shows as far as, I mean, there were shows that were filmed on television and matches that were filmed on television, but it was a lot less frequent. So there's hardly any tape surviving today of a lot of those matches from like the 50s and 60s. Like, you could find Lou Thez matches, but there aren't many, and that's, not even all of them broadcast on TV. Regular television didn't really happen until the, late 60s, early 70s.
Right, and that's a disappointment because there's a very important part of history in the 50s and 60s that we're missing from our archives.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then there is a match. I hope it's still on YouTube. It might not be. But if you want to see a very interesting match from I want to say it's 51 or 54. I can't remember which. But it's Wild Red Berry versus a babyface brunette, classy Freddie Blassie from California, I think it is.
That would have been really damn early in Freddie Blassie's career.
Yeah, it's a 2 out of 3 falls match. I believe it went like 40 minutes. It's quite good. I really had fun watching it. And Wild Red Berry ended up being in a lot of like sitcoms as a backup guy, and like, he was a more transcendent of the Hollywood culture because he wrestled mostly in California, as did Blassie, which is why, a lot of Hollywood took to them and how they knew them so well. But anyway. Right.
Now, television. Here's a question for you, Sean.
Yes.
Because you're going to know a little bit more about the territory stuff than I will.
A little bit. Not a lot.
So, what was the big television stations for wrestling? Because I know there was the Superstation in Atlanta.
Yep.
There was Time Warner, obviously, for the South.
Yep. And, I'm going to not remember all of the names and numbers, to be honest with you. But there was a lot of, see, this is why you're the statistician. I didn't expect it to be hit with a stat question.
Well, the other thing, too, I think it's just like, there weren't that many national at the time because most of it was regional, right?
No, it was all regional. Pretty much everything. I mean, there was the Memphis station. Mid-South had a variety of cable networks that they worked in association with because their territory was so large, because they were going into Oklahoma and Louisiana and Arkansas. And what also made that interesting is that the tape would be, filmed in a lot of time in Louisiana, and you'd get 2-3 weeks of house shows to a month of just running that show. You do the whole circuit of just that show and how long it takes to actually get to each various station and when it airs. So, by the time that you get to, the next town, they could have seen what's already happened on the show or not, but you would be able to follow it based on how quickly they got to the station. So it's fascinating because a lot of those dates that you and I saw in the Mid-South episode that we did about a month or so back, a lot of those dates are more like loose figureheads for the like general period of time where that was taped, because it had so many varying dates that it was used throughout the territory.
Not only that, but you would also sometimes tape more than one show in a single watching. So, for example, you would have like a 2-hour or 3-hour show, and then you would tape hour-long blocks, and that would be your TV show.
Yeah. And it's interesting because we watched the TV match on that we'll talk about in a little bit, because every show had a different vibe to it, and a lot of that I think also had to do with the station, because what Atlanta wanted and what Georgia was interested in was not what they were going to get from the Carolina station. They also had different regulations of what you could and could not say on television, because it was loosely regulated on a national scale, but for the most part, a lot of these TV networks were pretty much just held under their own jurisdiction. So there were certain things you couldn't get away with.
Well, part of it also just had to go back to the whole conversation of what were fans interested in. Because the wrestling that's in Florida is different from the wrestling in Mississippi, that's different from the wrestling in Carolina, different to the wrestling in Texas, California, Chicago, Illinois, the Northeast area,
Detroit.
In the United States. Detroit, and the Sheik's territory.
With Sheik, yep.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where the wrestling that was in Florida was different from the wrestling in Mississippi, and North Carolina, and Texas, and California, Northeast, and New York, Detroit. Chicago, the Sheik's territory, Vern's territory, Cowboy Bill Watts, so on and so forth.
Yep.
So the interesting thing is that there weren't that many national until the late 80s and 90s when the territories were starting to die out, and then Vince wanted to go national, and he tried to. Same thing with Jim Crockett Promotions, and those were the two big ones that were on the big stations. Time Warner was JCP's thing. USA Network was WWF's.
Yep. And they had been on some variation of that, like I think it was WGN, I want to say, where they had a very good relationship with them, from Vince Sr., from that relationship, and they were getting larger, and, Vince saw the signs that, a lot of the television was really starting to branch out of just these local areas, and that they wanted to kind of become this interconnected loop. And that's really where I keep wanting to say Triple H, because it's just exciting to say he's in charge of WWE now. It was Vince having the wherewithal to recognize that national TV and these big major networks like CBS and NBC and Fox were going to be the leaders of television and the future of television, and to associate with those networks and to get them a peripheral knowledge of what wrestling was about without going too deep into it to where they were going to want to start calling all the shots, which has been detrimental to many a wrestling promotion, which we'll, kind of talk about in a second, I think. But Vince...
Right, but Vince McMahon also was ruthless in going into a town and taking the time slot of the regional network pro wrestling slot. Like, when he went into Mid-South and he took Mid-South's TV time, that was ruthless.
Yeah, well, but at the same time, Watts was also, at that point where he was trying to do something else entirely as well. I don't think he was any more vindictive than he was to Vern. Vern and Greg.
Vern Gagne was destroyed by Vince McMahon.
Yeah, that was.
All of his talent.
Well,
TV.
Vince did the killing blow. Vern Gagne booking so that 90-year-olds were still wrestling, metaphorically speaking, but everybody was so old, it was all the old staples, and he didn't build any new stars, which is partially why the AWA was kind of on its last legs before Vince decided to pull the Gagnes behind the barn and pull the trigger. But in any case, it was really manipulation through the TV networks that caused Vince to have such meteoric success in becoming not necessarily the only game in town, but the most recognized game in town, especially with the national deal and Hulk Hogan being the charismatic enigma that he is.
Right. And then, of course, wrestling fell into a slow period in the 90s after WWF's expansion in the 80s. And then it took WCW and the Monday Night Wars to reinnovate wrestling back into what was arguably its hottest period.
Well, and it's worth noting, because I don't want to miss or take anything away from Crockett's years. From 84 to probably 87, a lot of people suspected, they were right up neck and neck. They had the TV time on TBS. They were getting good promos. A lot of people were still into that kind of wrestling. A lot of people viewed, Vince and WWE as that hokey stuff. And this is this is real wrestling where the real wrestlers come to compete. And they were doing a really good job of that until Vince started messing around with Crockett, saying to the pay-per-view networks, we're not going to give you WrestleMania if you don't air Survivor Series, which is running in direct competition to, I believe, not Clash.
Starrcade.
Yes.
Starrcade.
As Starrcade. So,
right. But that's one thing. The other thing, and we'll get into this conversation a little bit later, was a certain person's booking, Behbeh.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that because that was another part that kind of hurt it. And also, then the other part of the networks is when the networks decide that they want to really start getting hands-on. And that's where you get issues, a la Jim Herd, who really tanked WCW enough for Eric Bischoff to come and pick up the pieces.
Right. Were it not for Jim Herd, WCW probably would have been strong enough to survive Eric Bischoff attempting to buy it.
Even with Dusty, let's say that Dusty still lost his job. Rick was proficient enough at booking, even though it would be the Ric Flair show, almost literally. But he was proficient enough at booking because he was getting 4s, during, when he finally, Rick said, I'm going to take the book. I'm going to get this taken care of. These televisions were getting 4.1s and 4.2s. He was doing great. And the only reason Flair left the committee was because of Jim Herd. So it got to a point where, they actually had a competing chance, but then the network stuck its nose where it didn't belong. With WCW, standards and practices. All of a sudden the network's coming down saying you can't do this, and this, when they're like, well, we want to do something. And then Hulk at the other time is going, well, that doesn't work for me, brother. So it's the network getting involved can always lead to problems. Remember, they canceled TNA on Spike because they were secretly talking to Russo.
Well, I mean, that was the whole thing, is that TNA said, if you involve Vince Russo in any fucking way, we're done here.
Yeah, Spike's like, oh, Vince Russo? Okay, done. Goodbye. And
although, to be fair, that's a TV network involvement that you would have happily said yes.
Yeah, well, yes, but you remember how much of a feature and impact the network was after that. When they had Sting pretend to be the network exec, or when Mick Foley was the network exec, with Hogan there and changing the name to Impact Wrestling and all that. They used the network because the network legitimately does stick its nose in sometimes to professional wrestling, because they, especially when they see stuff like a barbed wire crown of thorns in AEW, or some of the crazy stuff that was coming out of WCW at the time. You know how many TV issues that ECW had?
ECW couldn't be featured on regular TV.
Yeah.
It would be featured at midnight, basically.
Yeah. So the network, while wrestling is great, when you talk about who really owns the power in professional wrestling, is most of the time the network. And it's up to the talent to also appease the network at the same time. They're trying to keep the talent happy and trying to keep the fans happy. So it is not an easy thing to balance without getting the network execs too into the equation to start causing problems.
Fair enough. Now, here's my question for you, Sean. Is that where do you see the TV networks going in the future with wrestling? Because right now, the big thing is streaming services. And I know USA Network has Peacock, so maybe WWE ends up on Peacock instead of regular TV?
Well, it depends on how much regular TV is going to go down. And, I think that we all thought that television was on its way out like 20 years ago. And it's still stuck around, even though it's now just easier to access on the internet. Like Peacock lets me watch football games, which are on TV. They're on the network, so I can't imagine that there won't be some level of like simul stream where you can watch it on TV or on Peacock. I wouldn't be surprised if, TNT or TBS does that eventually with AEW.
I wonder if you look at like the ESPN Plus model, where you can get all types of sports events happening at the same time, as well as watching it live on TV. So, for example, I could watch hockey or basketball or baseball on ESPN Plus, or even college games if I want to.
Yeah.
So I wonder if that happens to wrestling on some level, where a WWE show is happening live, and you can watch it on Raw, or not Raw. You can watch it on USA Network, or you can watch it on Peacock.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's going to be eventually what it turns into, and that's until the next latest thing comes out, where they're able to beam the show into your brain or whatever for $5.99 or whatever the fuck. So it's
$9.99, damn it.
The thing is, everything changes technologically. The networks change, the TVs change, but the problem is, there's only really like 4 or 5 companies running pretty much everything. So it's not like we have a ton. We don't have as much competition in that respect as one would really think. And on that basis, they're they're going to be competing on a much bigger game, of which wrestling is just a very small piece of that puzzle, which is also something for Tony Khan to have concern in. I think he is not as big a deal for that network as he thinks he is.
Right, and that's something that really is concerning because, well, I mean, it's concerning for AEW. I don't personally care one way or another.
Me either.
But it's one of the things where wrestling nowadays, to survive, they're at the mercy of the networks. So if the network wants something, the wrestling company has to give in.
Yeah, unless they're stupid or they have a very viable means of fighting it, or they're just sheer outnumbered like Jim Herd was a couple of times, but Jim Herd eventually won that and then lost everything. And the bottom line is that the networks are going to always have influence in professional wrestling. There might be some, probably not many alive, but there would be some that argued that wrestling died when it became part of television and it was televised. I'm sure that would be something that somebody has said at some point. So I'm sure that when it moves on to its next media, there's going to be that same level of people going, well, wrestling died when it, remember how many people said that WWE was going to fall flat in its ass with the WWE network?
Right, and then it kind of was like a future look into what Netflix is.
Yeah.
What HBO Max is, what Peacock and ESPN Plus is.
Yeah. So it's at the point, and we'll see what happens with the networks, but at this point you gotta respect the net.
You gotta respect the net. And speaking of respecting the nets, we're gonna go, and because we've been talking about the television networks, I think it's only fair to talk about one of the big time wrestlers who was involved with the networks. But the only way we're gonna do it is by watching one of his matches. And let's go to our match of the week.
What time is it?
It's the fight, it's the brawl, it's the match of the week. It's tonight, watch along with the son of a beat. It's one fall, the down for the 1, 2, and 3. So don't stall, hang on to the edge of your seat. We got a punch and a flip and a powerbomb too. All the moves and the stars are all under review. See the baby face cheered and the heels get heat. This is wrestling at its peak. It's the match of the week.
That's right, folks. It is our match of the week. And this match, I'm going to let Skylar describe to you, but it is on television. It was a TV match, TBS Network, and from what I heard, it's one of the very rare times that the man that you have aforementioned was on that network wrestling a match.
Yes, it was. This was a really interesting match because this is one of the few times that Duthty Rhodes appeared in the TBS studios. It is Duthty Rhodes wrestling versus Arn Anderson for the Jim Crockett Promotions TV Championship.
Appropriate. They're on television.
Now, I've been doing research for this match. There's a little bit of a discrepancy. I'm not sure if this is 85 or 86.
Okay.
It's one of the 2 years.
Fair enough.
I lean towards 86 because Arn Anderson didn't win the title until 86. But there's a little bit weird part about titles because this is when Jim Crockett Promotions was merging with other companies.
Yeah.
So there's that weird thing of title crossovers and winning titles.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure what year, but I'm leaning towards 1986.
And given the finish of this match, it didn't really matter at the end of the day. But
no, but Sean, I want to say something right now.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I didn't pre-screen this match, so I didn't know what to expect. I just saw Duthty Rhodes and Arn Anderson and thought, yes to this.
Well, it was a TV match. It was 13 minutes of nothing really happening and then a whole bunch of shit happening all at once that made it overbooked and a little confusing to a crowd that was a disappointing number.
Yeah.
And that's what they liked. Like it's not like they didn't fill the seats. They did. But that was kind of getting what we were saying back, when we were talking about the local networks, is that a lot of it was just in a studio. It was studio wrestling. So it was a smaller crowd and a smaller audience that you were able to hook for, maybe not necessarily the loudest cheers, but it still feels weird. It's just a different style. It was the style of the time. But I think that one of the things that Vince understood was that it was going to be way better with tons of people there.
Right, or at least in a bigger setting.
Yeah, more frequent, bigger setting. Yeah.
Yeah, but let's first off start with the most important question of this entire match. Did they start with a collar and elbow tie-up?
Yeah, but it would... Boy, I didn't realize how much I don't like Dusty's collar and elbow tie-up. It's just there.
You cannot accuse Duthty Rhodes of being a technical wrestler.
I know, but like... let me put it this way. I've seen Dusty do better. This was the effort of a TV match. You know what I mean? They put in the effort of a TV match, which was less than the effort that we've seen in some of their big-time matches.
So what you're saying is that there was a lot of rest holds and a lot of waiting and a lot of selling.
I wouldn't even call it rest holds. It was just a lot of back and forth. There was a lot of punches. It was yelling at Baby Doll. It was just, some chin locks that Tony kept calling a front face lock. Tony Schiavone, man, he has been around for a long time. I don't know how much I really like him on commentary solo.
That was one of the things that I'm like, if Tony Schiavone had a color person to at least give him some background sounds,
yeah,
maybe he'd be good. But he's way too green at this point to be calling a match by himself.
He wasn't bad. It's just that he can't quite properly sell the entirety of the moment just on his own. And that's not necessarily a major criticism of Tony either. I like Tony, but...
Well, here's the thing, Sean. Are you ready for my hot take for this match?
Do it.
Tony Schiavone was never a good commentator.
I don't necessarily disagree. But it's somehow he's become this iconic figure.
People care about him now is nostalgia, because he was the voice of WCW for a little bit of time. That's the only reason why people care about him.
Well, and remember who was with him to make him sound good? Dusty, Larry Zbyszko, and Bobby Heenan. So there were some wizards around Tony Schiavone, but anytime that Tony Schiavone wasn't around the wizards, he was just Tony Schiavone.
Yeah.
And, even with JR, he was better. So.
Yeah, but that's because JR is JR.
Yeah, see? But exactly. But, yeah, this needed somebody else. Not necessarily in replacement, but just in addition to.
Agreed. I don't know. Is there any spots in this match you really want to point to? Or you just want to go to the finish?
I don't really have anything. This was a nothing match. Nothing happened. It was just chin locks and some reversals, and Dusty working on the leg. Normally with a match of guys like this, I can't stop watching because I'm looking for all the little subtleties that they're doing. But I couldn't keep concentrated on it. I don't know what it was. I couldn't keep focus watching the match. And I think that a big part of that was that I've seen both of these guys wrestle, and I've seen them both wrestle better. There was a good body slam that Dusty gave. I mean, but that's mostly on Arn's own picture-perfect selling of a body slam. There was some chatter back and forth. Dusty got the crowd involved for the most part. And then, well, why'd you tell him?
Well, Dusty Rhodes booking. That's all it needs to be. There's a couple of ref bumps, and
no, there were three of them.
Kind of weak.
Three of them. This dude got the crap kicked out of him.
Yes, he did. He got bodies hurled at him. He was run into things.
Yeah, this poor guy.
Then, here comes Ole Anderson.
Right.
Okay. And then here comes Magnum TA to a big pop.
Yeah, people still love TA at this point. This was pre-accident TA.
Right.
And
this was what 6 months before he got his car accident,
something
and right
like
before
that.
he was about to become the Jim Crockett Promotions World Heavyweight Champion.
God, I can only imagine how Crockett would have succeeded and excelled if Magnum TA's career hadn't ended. People loved TA.
Right, like most likely, Magnum TA would have won the title in '87, and I mean, he probably would have beat Ric Flair for the title, honestly.
Yeah,
So
I mean, the feuds that
Crockett.
TA and Flair would have had, that TA and Terry Funk could have had at that time.
Right. All the horsemen, you could have done Barry Howowitz against TA. You could have done TA. I know he was retired at this point, but Mr. Wrestling 2, just bring him back one more time.
He could have. I mean, you could have done so much with him. I think that Jim Herd probably would have pushed him out, and then he would have gone to WWE and would have been called like Terry Bobungus and been losing with
I think
Waylon
Jim Herd
Mercy.
actually would have liked. I think Jim Herd would have liked Magnum TA.
Maybe. I would hope so. It depends on how much money he was bringing Crockett, and you know, it depends. Who knows? Who knows?
If Crockett had both Sting and Magnum TA, if Sting didn't get hurt and Magnum TA did not have his injury, those are two big-time main event stars. Magnum TA versus Sting.
Yeah, and then you've got Flair as a heel. You've got Arn. You've got the rest of the Horsemen as heels. You know, any formation of them against like the Midnight would sell. You could have done a lot with it, but the reason we're talking about all of those theoreticals is that they were all more fun and exciting and interesting than this match, which has two incredible stars, but this felt like Ryback versus Curtis Axel on Raw.
It was. And what the hell were these promos after?
They were passionate, fiery babyface promos. Dusty sounded like Dusty, and TA sounded like TA. He wanted to kick some ass. He wanted to beat the Andersons down. I liked TA's promo, and Dusty is Dusty, so, you know, was it his best? No, but it was fiery. But the more I'm watching these old school promos, the more I'm like, okay, so is the babyface promo either to go on a rambling rant or just go and scream, yell, angry man all the time? I think 3/4 of it is just picking up on your vibe. Because, I mean, think about how little the Warrior made sense, but the people loved the Warrior. Nothing the Warrior said ever made sense. Ever. You know, but the people were like, I don't know what this dude's saying, but he's got that look in his eye like he's going to tear somebody apart, so I'm going to root for him. You know, I think half of it is just vibe. You know, you catch the feeling of what Dusty's trying to get across, and then you get with Dusty. You know?
Yeah, I guess that's, again, why Dusty Rhodes is so beloved. And let's go ahead and shift, because honestly, there's not much more to talk about this. We're going to talk about the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, baby.
All right, baby, let's go. Let's get ourselves a good shucking and jiving.
Yes, and we're going to fuck you like a monkey on this bitch.
That's right. That's right. Well, Dusty has had a long career, long before he met Eddie Graham, which is really where he learned to book. But Dusty had a pretty extensive career that spanned a lot of different places.
Well, Dusty Rhodes went everywhere. I mean, eventually he would settle down in Carolinas, but I mean, he made shots in California, he made shots in Texas, he made shots in Mississippi, he did stuff in Mid-South, he did stuff in Detroit. Dusty Rhodes, he got his name out there by just going everywhere and learning from everybody.
Yeah, and Eddie Graham took a liking to him down in Florida, kind of taught him how to book, which really helped Florida all around. You know, between him and, you know, when you think about it, that both him and Kevin Sullivan were products of Eddie Graham out of Florida is pretty remarkable. And
it does put Eddie Graham in a good light that his disciples were some of the best and biggest, brightest stars in wrestling at a time.
And how they eventually learned to book. And then, of course, you know, when the Carolinas came along and Dusty was able to be proficient in that. But even when he was a heel, you know, not a lot of people remember him being a heel, but he was a good heel in like the 70s. I think there was a match. God, I can't remember what it was. Oh, it was WWF. It was Dusty Rhodes as a heel versus, I want to say, Bob Backlund. And
that would have been really interesting.
Yeah, and it's a 30-minute hoss of a fight, and I'm pretty sure it just went to a draw because Dusty ain't doing no jobs, baby. But Dusty had a reputation after a while of really doing a very, very proficient job at not only understanding the business, but also making it work for him, despite him not necessarily being the physical archetype of what professional wrestling was. This eventually led him to getting, the booking job in the Carolinas that eventually spanned through Crockett and into their national expansion. But the problem was...
Here's the thing, though. We do need to talk about one important thing with Dusty Rhodes. May I?
Yes.
Dusty Rhodes is not a technical wrestler. A lot of Dusty Rhodes matches, you have to understand right away,
it's flash.
Is that he does... Huh?
It's flash. It's more sizzle than steak.
Yeah, when you get into the sweet science of it, Dusty Rhodes is not a great worker, but he was paired with great workers who could cover for him. Moreover, what got him over was just his freaky charisma.
Yeah. Well, in that case, that's how he knew how to work people. He wasn't a great technical wrestler. He was never going to be Dynamite Kid versus Chris Benoit.
Right. There's no Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero happening here.
No.
But again, Dusty Rhodes, he may have learned an even more important skill, and that's just how to get over with the fans. What works in front of the fans. What gets people cheering on their top of their feet, screaming at the top of their lungs.
Yeah. And he was great with that. And 3/4 of it was the promos, that fire, that vibe that people were able to catch on to. And having a great foil in the guy like Ric Flair.
Right. Like, hard times, baby. Hard times.
And everything that Dusty and...
It may be the single greatest promo ever, is Hard Times.
It's one of the best. It's one of the best. And I think that a lot of people try to replicate what that stood for without realizing that it only works with someone like Dusty. Because the people have to believe in the person saying it more than they believe in the words. And that's something that was unique to Dusty.
It also matters who it's against. Because, again, Ric Flair was the perfect foil. They were the complete opposites of each other. Dusty Rhodes was a fat slob. Ric Flair is athletic and good looking.
He's affectionate. We mean that with the utmost affection with Dusty, that he was a fat slob.
Right. Dusty Rhodes is a man of the people. Ric Flair is a man of himself. These are two complete opposites, but they work so well together. It was the best pairing ever in wrestling until Rock and Austin.
Yeah. Oh, no, and they were tremendous, the kind of rivalry that they had. How much money, not only were they spending, but they were drawing everywhere, in their highest primes, even when they weren't working with each other and they were working near each other. But I think the difficulty was the more success that Dusty had, the more he believed he could do no wrong. And
what are you talking about? Dusty Rhodes does nothing wrong because Dusty Rhodes is the best, baby. I'll book everything like I want to, baby.
Well, and that's kind of the problem, is that he would have ideas, but there was nobody who would check Dusty. He'd need, to kind of be humble and be checked down every once in a while, to kind of keep that in line, because as we saw with the original Clash of Champions, half of that show's booking was lazy. I mean, it worked, but it was lazy. It was, and I think we saw that more evidenced, especially as the years went on, and people got a little more frustrated with the direction that things were going, and how they, even with Vince's interruption, but then, Dusty leaves Crockett because he's pushed out because of, well, what they call the Dusty finish and how it happened constantly.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the things, is that Dusty Rhodes could not operate with Jim Herd. The two just couldn't get along.
Yeah. And, and and then Dusty was relieved of his duties, and then they had the transitional booker and George Scott, which just did not work. And that's where Rick was like, okay, give me the book. And Rick started taking care of that. But then Dusty, here's the interesting thing, because he goes to the WWF, and after building up this massive legacy of believability, right? And the massive legacy of being a man of the people and being there for the people, he shows up to WWF in polka dots. And did it not feel like it was just a giant kick in the balls to somebody that Vince, for a very long time, viewed, aptly so, as his competition?
It was Vince McMahon saying, I'm going to pull a rib on you and humiliate you because you come to me, Vince McMahon, for money because you didn't manage your money right. And I'm going to be the one that owns you.
And to be fair, Dusty made the polka dots work. Even with his weird feud that involved that woman, Jasmine. And
it's just, again, disappointing that Dusty Rhodes, the thing that he's most known for now is the polka dots. Because there was so much more to do. Again, it's WWE and Vince McMahon always taking away stuff from people and just stripping them down to their lowest common denominator.
Yeah.
Jim Duggan, Dusty Rhodes,
yeah.
Tony Atlas, all these great regional wrestlers who were good on the regional scene or good in whatever company they were at. And the second they go to WWE, they have to be manufactured.
Yep. I mean, that was Vince's model. That was his goal. And
I'm just so glad that Vince is gone from WWE.
I sure am. And it makes me happy every time I get to hear it and say it. It just brings a smile to my face. But Dusty made it work.
Every day when I wake up in the morning.
Yeah, that's right. And when Dusty made it work until he finally was like, okay, I'm done with this. So he goes to WCW. And he pretty much is he's involved in some backstage stuff, and then he gets on commentary. What do you think about Dusty as a commentator?
I mean, Dusty Rhodes is a good talker, but I don't know if he's necessarily a good talker for other people.
Yeah, that's kind of how I would place it. I mean, hit and miss. He had his moments on commentary, but I wouldn't necessarily say that he was the greatest thing to happen to commentary. Especially with Bobby Heenan already on commentary. It's like, even though Dusty might be might be the baby face of that, with Tony being the, objective one and Bobby being Bobby, I don't know. It feels like it was almost like too much for those two to be in the same place at the same time, and actually have it sound the way that they wanted it to.
Right, and let's be clear, his wrestling was not good at this point.
Yeah, well, he wasn't doing much of it. He was doing an elbow drop here and there. The most I remember him doing was the elbow, to, I forget who it was. Was it one of the Steiners that turned him into the NWO, which was something that he shouldn't have joined, didn't need to join, and he did nothing once he joined?
Yep, and then also stuff with Ric Flair, because of course.
Yeah, but not even a lot, not even consequential stuff. But then, then the whole merger, WCW goes under, and before he goes back to the WWE, he helps found TNA, which is, a lot of people don't remember he was one of the forefathers of TNA. He was there for a little while. During this time, he was also competing in Major League Wrestling, because they had the MLW Underground show, and I believe that you could still see a match. And I kid you not, this is I think we might have even reviewed it on this show. Dusty Rhodes versus Terry Funk versus Steve Corino in a triple threat hardcore match, or street fight, or whatever it was. All three bleeding.
That hurts me.
Oh,
just you saying that hurts me.
Yeah, it was a bit cringe. I won't lie to you, it was a bit cringe. But Dusty was doing that on the side, but also was working, behind the scenes for TNA. Then we don't really see much out of him, and he goes back to WWE.
Right, and a lot of what he does in WWE between '05 and 10 is just him doing stuff around town, making appearances because he's on a Legends contract. He gets put into the Hall of Fame in 2007. He helped start Cody Rhodes' career.
Right. Because obviously there was a lot of stuff that they did with Dusty and Cody. The last match that Dusty ever had was that 6-man tag that that he did, and that was and I forget how old he was at that point, but he had already lost a lot of weight from the time that he had, from his wrestling days. He had really toned down a bit. But that was what, 2012?
That would have been, 2010, 2011 or something?
Yeah, maybe 2011. Maybe you're right. It's
So he would have been what? Hang on. 65 or 66?
Yeah. So, but, he didn't really have to do much in that because Cody and Dustin were going to handle the majority of it. But
But then one of the biggest late stages of his career happens at this time. He becomes the head trainer of training at NXT. And Sean, just listen to the names I'm going to give you of the early NXT graduates.
Yes.
Ready?
Do it.
Charlotte Flair.
Yeah.
Sasha Banks.
Yeah.
Bayley.
Yep.
Becky Lynch.
I see a trend.
Kevin Owens.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Finn Balor.
Yeah. Well, nah. Blah.
Sami Zayn.
Definitely pulled personality out of him.
Adrian Neville before he got ruined.
Yeah. Sad. F's in the chat.
But again, listen to the people that he trained, especially the 4 horsewomen.
Yeah.
Dusty Rhodes helped inspire a generation of wrestlers who, at the very least, succeeded in main roster WWE. Even if Vince McMahon ruined them, he got them to that point.
Well,
and he really helped a lot of guys with their careers.
I think if you looked at the entirety of WWE's roster now, as well as some of AEW's guys who were, part of that same kind of area for a very extended amount of time up until the time he passed, Dusty has touched a lot of people in pro wrestling still to this day. There are a lot of people who have had some influence of Dusty Rhodes in them as far as being able to coach and mentor, and that's really what Dusty should have been doing from 2002 on, in my opinion.
Imagine if Dusty Rhodes had been working with Jim Cornette at OVW.
Well, unless Laurinaitis would have kicked been the thorn in the side, and Dusty would have just given up on that. Also, I don't know how much.
That's the thing that should have happened, is that the head of talent relations should have been Dusty Rhodes, Jim Cornette should have been running OVW, and John Laurinaitis should have been running the hot dog stand.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Dusty has a mind of his own, and Vince didn't want people with minds of their own. You're right. It would have been great, especially as Jim Ross is the one who stepped down. Can you imagine if Dusty took that role? Shoot. That would have been really impressive.
Yeah. But again, Dusty Rhodes is one of the most influential wrestlers in the ring, on the microphone, and behind the scenes and backstage roles. And nobody will ever touch his legacy.
Yeah. And I remember all of us being very, very genuinely heartbroken when Dusty passed. I mean, I remember shedding some tears during that tribute video they made.
It was hard when they were ringing the 10-bell salute because on some level, Dusty Rhodes contributed to wrestling and what you saw today and what you saw then.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. It's
I just wish that they didn't do the thing that they do with Eddie Guerrero that they also do with Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah.
I know it's his son. So on a level, I guess that's okay. And I guess it's part of his gimmick is him living in the shadow of Dusty.
Yeah. He's made it into something of his own, which is why I'm still sad that we never got the heel turn, because they really could have hammed it up with that. As evidenced by ACPW versus NWL, which is next week, by the way.
Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right, with the major August show from Orlando, the Midsummer Showdown for ACPW. And more World Cup shenanigans.
Yep. But I think part of me wonders when Cody Rhodes wins the world title. I think he's going to win the world title at some point.
Me too.
I wonder how much Dustivation will they be doing, baby? All across our screen.
Oh, probably the whole match. Probably the whole damn match. That's going to be one where we're going to have to just like leave it as is, and hopefully it won't be too bad, but I would not be surprised if that is a very accurate prediction by Skylar Greenberg.
Right.
But
I'm sad, but I know it's going to happen. But again, cheers to you, the American dream, Dusty Rhodes.
we love you, Dusty. We really do. What a career to leave behind. Someone who made a true positive mark. Despite his faults, he had a positive stomach mark on this wrestling business.
Hey, are you just saying that because he's fat?
No, he actually had a mark on his stomach, like a birthmark on his stomach. It's one of his trademark features. Yeah, no, I'm saying that because of his actual birthmark. Factual information. And that's all you get.
Today.
That's all you get is factual information at the Court-Martial Podcast. But the only way you're going to know that is to like, to share, to subscribe, to hit that bell button, switch it to all. And folks, I've got to start getting my talent together so we can put on a show of a lifetime for you next week. And Sky, I know you've got to do the same with NWL. So thank you for hosting this show, my friend. It has been a hell of a time now that we're heading towards our first commercial break.
It is. And I want all of you to be right here next week when we take on the NWO World Cup and the August Midsummer Showdown. Because, ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be a rockin' time. And it's going to be a fun time. And more importantly, it's going to be better than anything Tony Khan books.
Ever. And while it may not be as good as Triple H, the jury's still out on that. Let's see what he's doing. We'll see what happens. But right now, we still have the advantage. We're not worried, Tony Khan, but you ought to be. But until then, folks, we'll be right back.
We got to play the game, right?
That's right. That's right. And I'm going to roll this 20-sided die and catch you right after this.